Joe Rogan Podcast, check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
How are you, man? Good to see you again.
Good. Thanks for having me back, man.
My pleasure. You made another awesome one, man. This, the Krishna's one. Oh, my God. Whew. There is something about these cult documentaries.
Right.
It's just,
Right.
whew, that one's heavy.
Do you remember the Hare Krishna devotees in the airports? Because you're like me, like you're old enough of that generation that you might remember the white robe. Like
I remember
they'd have
them.
the flowers and they'd be selling books and shit in the airports.
I don't know if I remember them at the airports. I remember them in some places.
Yeah.
I definitely have seen them, you know? Yeah. But, yeah, I just always thought they were just kooks. You know, it's just, it's interesting, you know, knowing what I know now about the 60s and, you know, what was done to sort of, to kind of crush the hippie movement.
Right.
You know, it's interesting to see that this was connected to, you know, the Beatles and peace and love, and then you see this sect that this what was his name again?
Kirtanananda
Yes.
was the guru that went way wrong.
Yeah, went way wrong.
Yeah.
But it is, well, let's just get into from the beginning. How did you get involved in this particular subject?
So there's a production company, Marwar Junction, and they had actually sold this show to Peacock, and they were looking for a director. So this is the first show that I've made or helped to make that I haven't been involved in the sort of conception of the story from the jump. So they had developed the story and sold it to Peacock, and they were shopping for a director, and they liked my work, and so they hired me to make it.
And so did you have any experience with the Krishnas before this?
No. And I had, like a lot of people, I had a lot of misconceptions about them. Like I thought that there was that the Hare Krishna movement was invented in America in the 1960s. I just had it associated with the sort of the hippie movement, you know, and that's not the truth of it at all. It's like actually a spiritual tradition that, you know, dates back thousands of years, like far predates Christianity. It's based in these ancient spiritual texts called the Vedas that, you know, the written version is like at least 3,500 years old, and the oral tradition goes back thousands of years beyond that. So I learned a lot about, you know, Krishna consciousness in the making of this, and the show is about a particularly dark chapter in the history of the movement in the 70s and 80s that I don't think is representative of the movement like today. Like I think it's a force for good in the world today, actually.
Yeah, I think the principles behind it, if you paid attention to the main guru, what was the older gentleman's name?
Prabhupada, yeah.
Yeah, my friend Duncan loves that guy.
Yeah.
And what the whole concept behind it sounds beautiful. You know, it's all just love and, you know, relinquishing your possessions and the hold that they have on you, and just living this very peaceful, loving life, and not just forgiving your enemies, but letting them into your home. And all of it sounds great. But all it takes is one psycho.
Yeah, one psycho. Well, Prabhupada, he took a risk. I mean, so Prabhupada was a guru. So several gurus, Krishna Consciousness gurus, had come over from India to the UK or to the US, you know, in the 1800s even, and then through the first half of the 20th century, and had no luck because their timing wasn't right, or they weren't the right person, or both. But Prabhupada was the right dude at the right time. He showed up in Greenwich Village, New York City in 1965 and started preaching Krishna consciousness, and it just like, you know, took off like wildfire. And, you know, like Allen Ginsberg got down with it. Wasn't maybe a full-scale devotee, but like he was hanging out with them. But Prabhupada was already an old dude when he showed up in the U.S. And so in 1977, he died. So that's 12 years. And by that time, Krishna consciousness, there were like Krishna temples all over the country and in the UK because George Harrison had converted, right? That was one of his like strokes of brilliance, Prabhupada, is he like sent a group of devotees to go camp out outside the Apple Records office and just like chant and dance until they basically got a meeting with the Beatles. And he was literally like, let's see if we can make the Beatles, you know, Krishnas. And with Harrison, it took. You know, and that song, My Sweet Lord, I mean, that's what it's about. That's about Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
So, but when Prabhupada died in 1977, you know, he hadn't had a lot of time to build up successors, and most of the leaders of the movement were young, or most of the members of the movement were young. So he took a risk, and I don't think he had a choice. And he appointed 11 of his closest, longest time devotees, all men, to be the gurus that would carry the movement forward. And while you could say that it worked and that Krishna consciousness is still around and is bigger than ever, a few of those, these are dudes. These are like dudes in their 20s, okay, that suddenly are being worshipped as direct conduits to the divine. In other words, treated as gods on earth.
Yeah.
And some of them were not spiritually prepared for that.
Yeah.
Would be a kind way to put it. And some of them went wrong, and one of them in particular, Kirtanananda, whose government name was Keith Ham, went really wrong.
I like the term government name.
Yeah.
Well, that is a thing that they always do, right? They give them spiritual names.
Yeah, you relinquish your,
Yeah. Your original existence.
yeah, and take a Krishna name.